welcome to another edition of the OBR Roundtable for the matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. I'm your host, Corey Gaudreau, and last week the Browns lost in a nail-biter out in Los Angeles against the Chargers after a couple of abysmal calls from the referees and a defense that let up 47 points after a few secondary injuries piled up there at the end of the game. The Browns now move on to the final undefeated team in the NFL in the Arizona Cardinals, led by current MVP candidate Kyler Murray at quarterback. Despite giving up 47 points last week and going against the unbeaten team, the Browns, however, are the favored team coming into this matchup. It looks like this will be probably another matchup here of two young quarterbacks going into a shootout, and this Cardinals defense has yet to be tested so far this season. Jake Burns will be coming in to break down the Cardinals, and we'll hear from our analytics expert, Cody Sook, as well. But first, let's bring in our beat reporter, Fred Greetham, to start off talking about the injury report. Fred, like I said, that injury report did just come out a couple of hours ago. A lot of bad news on it for Browns fans, I would say. For those that haven't heard, what's the story coming out of Berea?
Well, so far it's not quite as bad as it could have been. I mean, of course, the headliner, Nick Chubb, has been declared out, along with Malcolm Smith, but they have 10 guys questionable. Last week they had 10 guys questionable and 2 didn't play, but one of the ones got injured in pregame, and Jadeveon Clowney. I think the biggest thing is the defense most people were worried about because they gave up 47 points and most of the injuries. There was some significant guys that left the game and didn't return. Denzel Ward left early, did not return last week. Greedy Williams left late, did not return. JOK was in the hospital with a throat contusion. They were pretty banged up. Jadeveon Clowney did not play because of elbow and knee injury. All those guys practiced the last 2 days on a limited basis, and I believe most of them are going to play, if not all of them. 3 cornerbacks, Greg Newsome, who missed the last 2 games, practiced this week. He was limited, questionable, as well as Greedy Williams and Denzel Ward. All 3 of them, though, are expected to play. And that would be a big boost because the Cardinals have, run 4 or 5 wide receivers, and they need all the corners they can get. Last week, the Browns finished the game with just A.J. Green and Troy Hill on the field. All the other cornerbacks were gone. In addition was M.J. Stewart. He's been put on injury reserve. So it's a positive with the 3 corners. The 3 top defensive ends, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, and Takk McKinley, all practice. They all have 2 different injuries apiece, but I think they are all 3 expected to play. Malcolm Smith was declared out with an abdomen injury, but with Anthony Walker back and JOK playing more snaps, they can absorb that loss. As far as the offense is the biggest questions, I mentioned Nick Chubb is out, but you're very fortunate to have a guy like Kareem Hunt. Not too many teams have the former NFL rushing champion as their backup running back. Chubb obviously is the second leading rusher in the NFL, but Hunt's not too bad himself. I think currently he's 18th in the NFL in rushing on part-time duty. And, even though he missed Wednesday and Thursday with a wrist and a knee injury, he was back at practice today and he is going to start. Expect Dearness Johnson to maybe be the backup running back this week. Very capable back that hasn't been able to get a chance. Then the biggest other question is at the tackle positions. Jed Wills, who's had that ankle for several weeks, actually didn't play last week, came back to practice Wednesday, looked like he was ready to go, and then he went and talked to the trainer and did not practice Thursday or Friday, but he has not been declared out. Kevin Stefanski said they're going to wait the next 48 hours, see how he is doing. The same thing with Jack Conklin. He left the game with a knee injury last week and did not practice this week. But both those guys are listed as questionable, even though they didn't practice. So one or both could play, or one or both could not play. If neither of them start, you probably see Blake Hance at left tackle and rookie James Hudson at right tackle. Kind of under the radar last week against Joey Bosa. Blake Hance didn't give up any sacks, and both those guys played pretty well. So they'll be called upon, again, to handle the duties this week. So that's pretty much the injury report. I don't see it in front of me. If there's some I missed, feel free to ask me about it. But I think those are the biggest ones. I know David Njoku didn't practice, but he came back the last 2 days, and he's questionable, but he's expected to play.
Now, Fred, you nailed all of it as far as the injury report goes. So we've generally seen that the Browns will let players play through injuries early in the season. Nick Chubb didn't appear to look injured at the end of the Chargers game last week. Greg Newsome was instantly ruled out with a calf injury for the past 2 weeks, similar injury that Nick Chubb is dealing with right now. Is the team more cautious with certain injuries or certain players when it comes to these types of injuries?
Well, Kevin Stefanski was asked that, and he said no. He wouldn't say cautious. He said be smart. I think it has to do somewhat when you have depth, when you have somebody that can play that's just about, there's not a significant drop off. It is interesting with the turnaround. There's only 4 days after Sunday's game, they play the Broncos. So I'd almost say that if Chubb's not going to play this week, I would kind of think he probably wouldn't play against the Broncos as well. One I didn't mention was Jarvis Landry was designated for return today from injured reserve. He's missed 3 weeks or 3 games. He could play this week, but it is a little odd that he wasn't designated till today. They have till 4 o'clock on Saturday to activate him, but they also have 21 days to make him active. And if I'm reading between the tea leaves, because he didn't really practice a whole lot that we know of today, I don't think he'll play Sunday, and I don't think he'll play Thursday against the Broncos. And you might see him, back when they play the Steelers on the 31st. I'm just guessing. They just said that was the natural time to bring him off of so he could start practicing. They can't practice till they've been taken off or they've been designated for return. But he still has to be activated, and they have 21 days to do so. I'm just guessing that he won't be active for Sunday's game. He could be, and he could be activated for Thursday's game with the Broncos. Stefanski said it didn't have anything to do with one or the other, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, the calf is a we've seen it held Denzel Ward out 4 games last year, 2 games so far with Newsome. If he doesn't play this week, it would be 3. And Chubb, we really don't know the extent of it. I was kind of critical of Stefanski with 3 minutes and 18 seconds to go, the second to the last drive last week, that Nick Chubb was standing on the sideline. No disrespect to Kareem Hunt, but he had really been the hot back. He said today that he thinks he was hurt late in the game. He wasn't in on that series, and he really, I don't think, was beyond that. So that could have very well been why he wasn't out there, is because of the calf injury. So hopefully it's not too serious, but they are very fortunate that they have backup like Kareem Hunt, Dearness Johnson. They also have Demetric Felton, who's been practicing with the wide receivers, so he could probably be the 3rd running back this week. Or they could bring up John Kelly from the practice squad. He was protected last week, which means that another team couldn't snag him off the practice squad. So anything could happen tomorrow. We'll see who they may elevate up from the practice squad. If they elevate a cornerback, then that tells you that maybe one of those 3 guys might not play. Or AJ Green, I guess he also is questionable with an injury. So they actually have 4 cornerbacks that are questionable.
So the Cardinals are led by former number one overall pick Kyler Murray, another mobile quarterback facing up against the Browns. So, Fred, how do you think the Browns should go about trying to handle or contain Murray in their offense?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. I just posted the story. It's on the front page of the OBR.com right now. And I think I had titled it is this JOK's was he drafted for a time like this? I mean, back when leading up to the draft, I know I talked a lot and a lot of us talked a lot about they have to find some guy that could spy or slow down Lamar Jackson with his legs. He just takes off and runs, not only the Browns, but about any team. And they drafted Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and one of the closest guys that would fit that mold in the draft. And I asked Joe Woods this week, point blank, did you envision when you drafted JOK him being able to get after Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray or guys like that? And he started laughing and said, yes. And I asked him to expound on it. And he explained, speed and all that. And he mentioned Grant Delpit. Then I followed up with a question. I said, what about a spy? Can you put a guy on in the NFL? They do that in college, but can you do that in the NFL and say, okay, that's your job, is just to go and shadow or go everywhere he goes and just contain that one guy? And he said, yeah, you can, but you got to pick your spots. With that said, that's what the story's about. I think this is the time to try it out. It's not Lamar Jackson. You got two big games with Lamar Jackson, and if you can, say some of the part of the game, hey, JOK, you see number one back there, just don't let him run. Just contain him. Make him stay behind the line of scrimmage. If he takes off running, make sure that you keep him in front of you, because we've seen it for years. Jackson just kills the Browns on 3rd and long. He takes off running. And, obviously there's more guys than that. Grant Delpit could do that, maybe a couple others. But, I think that would be, the best bet is just go mano and say, contain that guy. That's your only job, is don't let him beat you with his legs, and keep him behind the line and in the pocket. Maybe easier said than done, but that's what my story's about. And I think, Woods talked about keeping him in the pocket, and that's where the edges, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, McKinley can't go so far wide that opens up lanes and it allows him to get through. And that also means that the two Malik Jackson, Malik McDowell, need to penetrate the pocket and not allow him to step up and run up the middle. We saw Herbert do that last week. And, you could make a case. The Browns have not been able to really stop mobile quarterbacks. I know Herbert wouldn't be considered a mobile quarterback. He picked up 29 yards last week on like 4 or 5 carries, but one of them was a 9-yard touchdown. The other ones, I think, were all for first down. So that's one of the most dangerous things. You saw what Patrick Mahomes did. You saw what Lamar Jackson did last year. I just really think that with this mobile quarterback, the Browns have to figure out somehow, some way to contain him, keep him in the pocket, and not let him beat him with their legs. And even saw it with Tyrod Taylor in the second game until he got injured. So I think this is I'm not saying the whole game, but I'm saying maybe this is where you try it out. See if you can, get some positive plays with JOK. I mean, he played 91% of the plays last week on defense, even after he had the throat contusion that put him in the hospital. So he's up to speed. That's the most he's played, almost double the snaps that he was playing. So they feel comfortable with him and Delpit. I think it's time to put together a package and see what he can do, in that front. So, I'm interested to see what other people think.
Yeah, it could be quite some time that we're watching JOK chasing around quarterbacks in the NFL. We've got a couple of questions coming from our folks that are tuning in live on twitch.tv, starting with K Primer. Could the Browns be in the trade market for a backup tackle?
Well, I think they're always looking. Yeah, they're Chris Hubbard was kind of your security blanket. They kept him on the team, paid him a lot of money, 4.8 million, to be that swing guy that backed up both tackles and guards. Now he's gone, and with the perpetual problem with Conklin and Wills, that would make a lot of sense. I mean, until you can get Conklin and Wills completely healthy, you're going to continually, week to week have this type of situation. Although I do know that they're very pleasantly pleased with Blake Hance. In fact, Alex Van Pelt brought it up and said, I can't believe nobody's asking about him, that he stepped in at left tackle, went up against Joey Bosa, and really did a tremendous job. Nobody even heard about, Bosa's name called last week, and nobody, really heard Hance's name, which is a good thing. It means he didn't have a holding, or he didn't give up a sack, or he didn't have a false start. And he's a guard. He did play tackle, he said today, when he played college at Northwestern, but I think that's grooming a backup tackle. And then Hudson is growing every game, got thrown in at right tackle and did a good job last week when Conklin went out. So, they are developing some backups right now. But yeah, if there's one that became available, in a trade, I would definitely look at that for sure, because you don't know long term, how Will's ankle's going to hold out, as well as Conklin's knee.
So the Browns' next game is Thursday night next week. So they've got a short week coming up to prepare for that game. Going back and talking about some of those injuries, that extensive list of those questionable folks, will we see some of those questionable players held out when they usually wouldn't due to this short week of preparation?
Well, yeah, that's hard to know. I mean, it's almost too, you almost feel like if somebody's held out for injury this week, that would roll over into Thursday, because if they feel that holding Wills out would allow him to get completely healthy, you know, by missing 2 games, or Conklin, I think they do that. I think that Chubb would probably lead that list, but yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I don't know what their mindset is with these guys. Like I said, we don't really get to see them practice anymore. We get to see them stretch and walk around doing individual drills or whatever, and all we can see who's on the field and who's over with the trainers, and over there they're pretty much on stationary bikes. So we don't know how bad these injuries are. But Chubb wasn't out even on the field the last 2 days. Obviously, he was in getting treatment. So it's just hard to speculate. But I would think if a guy isn't even close to playing this week, that yeah, he would probably miss the Broncos game. And I would think Chubb would probably be at the top of the list. And and then you can go from there. I know they played Wills right through the injuries until last week, because they felt he was better than the option of playing a backup like Hance or Hudson. I think they might have a little better feeling about Hance now after last week's game. And so we'll see. I mean, I really can't speculate, but you might get a 2-for-1. Guys that don't play might be held out, but I think most of those guys that are questionable are going to play. Now, JC Tretter, see, they all have different questionable. JC Tretters doesn't practice all week. He's questionable every week, and he starts and plays the whole game. So there's a better questionable and a less than better questionable. They used to take out, or they used to have like out, doubtful, questionable, and probable. They took out probable and doubtful. So it's either out or questionable. So, it's really hard to read into it. But I do think the Thursday night will play into it if somebody is less than 100%, for sure.
Fred, do you have any final thoughts on Sunday's matchup before we let you go?
No, I think that it's a bounce back game for the Browns. I mean, the offense got back on track last week. It's going to be a big blow without Nick Chubb, but by having Kareem Hunt, you that is the most vulnerable aspect of the Cardinals defense. They're 28th in the NFL and against the rush. They give up about 140 yards a game. Browns are number 1 in the NFL. So if you do have backups, that bodes, it's easier for them guys, the Hanses and the Hudsons, to run block, or even the injured guys, Wills or Conklin, to run block. So with Kareem Hunt, Ernest Johnson, I still think that'll be the bread and butter. But I think the Browns will bounce back this week, and I see them winning, 31-27, and get up to 4-2 heading into that Thursday night game.
Thanks so much for joining us, Fred. And you can check out Fred's Berea Report live on the OBR.com right now.
All right, guys.
Thanks again for Fred. Last week we missed him, but he's back. It's our resident analytic expert, Cody Sook, and he's back to talk about some of the things that the Browns can take advantage of this week against the Cardinals. Take a look.
Fans, for tonight's analytics segment, we're going to focus on a couple of key matchups and also a couple of things I deem the X factor coming into this Sunday evening matchup against the undefeated Arizona Cardinals. The first key matchup I want to look at is Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt versus the Cardinals rush defense. Thus far, through week 5 of the 2021 season, Chubb ranks first in missed tackles forced per attempt, first in elusive rating at 122.8, and he is second in both explosive runs with 14 and yards per attempt with 5.8. Kareem Hunt has also been a very effective runner on the ground this season. Thus far this season, he's second in missed tackles forced per attempt at 0.031, second in elusive rating at 113.3. He's seventh in explosive runs with 9, and he's fifth with 5.4 yards per attempt. They have an opportunity this week to exploit a Cardinals defense that has been kind of lackluster, if you want to use that term, against the run. So far this season, they've allowed the second most yards per attempt at 5.4, the fifth most total rushing yards of 695, and the sixth highest success rate to opponent ground games. Lastly, the Cardinals defense against the run has allowed the second most second-level yards at 1.94, which measures the yards opponent running backs earn more than 10 yards past the line of scrimmage divided by total running back carries. This is another plus matchup for the Browns rushing attack. The next matchup I want to talk about is wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones versus Cardinals cornerback Antonio Hamilton. Donovan Peoples-Jones was a sleeper candidate coming into the 2021 season, and for the first time this season, he saw a fair amount of targets come his way. He had 6 targets a lot this past Sunday, where he hauled in 5 for 70 yards with 4.3 expected points added and a 50% success rate, i.e. the percentage of plays with a positive expected points added. This week, he will draw coverage at least at times from Cardinals cornerback Antonio Hamilton, who has allowed 8 receptions and 11 targets for 97 yards and a 99.4 passer rating in coverage this season. The Cardinals defense overall has been pretty stingy against the pass, ranking 3rd in EPA per dropback, but this is a matchup I think the Browns can exploit when they do put the ball in the air. Next, we're going to take a look at 2 things I deem the X factor this week. The first is the Browns' red zone offense, which currently ranks 25th in red zone efficiency from a touchdown perspective, scoring a touchdown on only 57.9% of trips inside the opponent's 20-yard line. The Browns are the NFL's most run-heavy offense in the field zone this season, with a 73-27 run-to-pass ratio that is well in excess of the league average of a 51-49 pass-to-run ratio. I like to see the Browns put the ball more in the air inside the 20 this week, particularly when looking at guys like Rashard Higgins and Donovan Peoples-Jones and running back Kareem Hunt. So far this season, Odell Beckham Jr. has kind of dominated the red zone targets with 7 compared to other receivers who are 6 and under. The second X factor I'm looking at this week, is the Browns getting home with just a 4-man pass rush. The Cardinals use a lot of 10 personnel. When we talk about 10 personnel, it's 1 running back, 0 tight ends, and then 4 wide receivers, what they use on 22% of their plays, which is the most in the league. The Browns have used a 4-man pass rush on 65% of opponent passes this season, which is the 10th most, and they have allowed a 41% positive play percentage when rushing just 4 men. The Browns most likely this week are going to stick with that cover 3, cover 4 defensive look that they've used on 73% of defensive snaps this season, and they want to have as many defensive backs as possible to attack that Cardinals offense that currently ranks 6th in EPA per dropback. But the Browns, with the 4-man pass rush, currently lead the entire NFL in quarterback pressure percentage at 42.6%. This is something to watch this week as the Browns hopefully get Jadeveon Clowney back, and with Takk McKinley continue to improve on the opposite edge of Myles Garrett as well. The Browns have a pretty tough matchup this week with the Arizona Cardinals at home, a game they are favored in against an undefeated team, but should they come out, play complete 4 quarters and complete complimentary football for the first time this season, I think they have a good chance to win. Take care, everybody.
Thanks as always to Cody for sharing his thoughts, and joining me now on the OBR roundtable is the OBR's very own resident film expert, Jake Burns. And Jake, the Cardinals, as we said earlier, the last remaining unbeaten team in the NFL. However, a little difficult to gauge exactly how good they are. Of their 5 wins, 2 are against rookie quarterbacks, and 1 game was sort of given to them when Minnesota missed a 38 some odd yard field goal towards the end of the game. So luck has certainly been on their side, which you need to have in the NFL to do well and, go all the way. So it's nothing to say that they're not a very strong team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So what can we expect from the Cardinals offense this Sunday?
Well, they're led by a dynamic quarterback and Kyler Murray. I'm not telling you guys any secret. Maybe it is a secret you don't know. The Browns once again face backup quarterback Colt McCoy in some form or fashion. That seems to happen like every year. They play the team that Colt McCoy lands on. It's kind of ironic. Anyway, they're led by Kyler, and Kyler's having a great passing year. He's putting up about 74, 75% completion percentage. I think he's thrown 10 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, playing really well within the structure that Cliff Kingsbury puts forth for him. They're doing a nice job blocking for him too. But Kyler's not really, it's something that you should note here is that Kyler is not really running much this year. I think he's hovering right about 100 yards through 5 games collectively, 3 touchdowns. He's not a part of much of their designed run game, and he has a beat up right shoulder. So I don't expect him to be getting a ton of run-based RPOs where he is the focal point for run game. They could sprinkle some in, but I don't expect a ton. Just because of the shoulder he's dealing with. And it seems that there's been a shift in how they're approaching running him to keep him healthy. So it'll be paramount on the Browns to not let him extend plays to throw downfield, because that's where he's the most dangerous. And this is the toughest mobile quarterback challenge to date. Pat Mahomes and Justin Herbert are obviously nice players, but they don't win games based on their legs. It's a part of what they can do, but they don't win games because of them. And not saying Kyler does either, but Kyler's just a better athlete. I don't think I'm telling you guys anything that's that you don't know, but Kyler's a unique athlete in that sense. So boxing him in the pocket, trying to manipulate where he goes in the pocket and tries to escape would be wise, because he has 4 very, very good wide receivers. They will play 10 personnel, meaning 1 running back, 4 wide receivers, more than anyone in the league. They were approaching 80 snaps, which was first across the NFL. They have AJ Green that they will play in the slot as sort of a big slot replacement for Larry Fitzgerald. They'll play DeAndre Hopkins, who we all know is one of the league's premier wide receivers. Then they're playing Christian Kirk and Rondale Moore, both speedy threats who can stretch you vertically, open up things for players underneath. They've done a really nice job with him. They just lost Max Williams, so their tight end room's in flux. We know that they just traded for Zach Ertz. That won't happen. Obviously, he won't be on the field this Sunday, but that's sort of the transition they're going through with their tight end room. In this game, former Brown, Demetrius Harris will be a part of things. We'll see who else they might try to replace there with. But the crux of what they do well is 10 personnel with those 4 wide receivers. And Rondale Moore, the rookie out of Purdue, is a really, really good football player who's doing some fun gadget plays for them. Their running backs are Chase Edmonds and James Conner, kind of a scat back, and Chase Edmonds more of a downhill power back we know from James Conner's days in Pittsburgh. Not a very good running football team. They run the football into the lightest boxes, meaning the fewest defenders in the NFL, and they still don't run it well. That's because they really spread you out. I made the equation that if you call Baltimore the Navy of the NFL in terms of offense, because of the triple option things they do and the different gadgets they have in run game, this is more, no pun intended, because of Texas Tech and Cliff Kingsbury, but they're like the Texas Tech, right? The spread them out style of football that is unique to what the Cardinals are doing. They're missing a big piece of their offense in Rodney Hudson, the center, who has been a nice piece for them coming over from Oakland, a really good player. He's dealing with a rib injury, so he is out this week, was predetermined out early. But how they're able to block Miles, and we'll see if Clowney plays or Tack plays, but they have DJ Humphries and Kelvin Beachum at tackles who are fine enough, but they're not among the best in the NFL. So the Browns should not have too much trouble creating some pressure here and there. Justin Pugh and Josh Jones are their guards, serviceable players. We'll see who wins the battle between the Maliks, both McDowell and Jackson. That's going to be interesting to follow along to. But really what the Browns are able to do, getting past Beachum and past Humphries, will dictate how comfortable Kyler feels in the pocket. It's a dangerous offense because they're unique. We might see the Browns try to, as I've illuminated on my podcast this week, go defensive back heavy. You could get into some dime sets where you have 4 cornerbacks playing. If Greedy and Denzel are healthy, which we're hearing they're going to play, you could bump Greg Newsome inside with Troy Hill, have those 4 corners on the field at one time, maybe even move Ronnie Harrison up and play dime backer, and then allow Grant Delpit and John Johnson to be deep. It should be a game when we look back on it and record data. It's one of their highest nickel and dime package setups for the Browns. It should be the ones that they're going to most to match the personnel, because really what they do, Corey, is match the personnel. If they go heavy, they're going to put heavier players on the field. Cleveland will. They'll put more linebackers, so on and so forth. But yeah, that's what they try to do. Offensively, they'll try to stretch you horizontally and vertically and try to create some angles. And Kyler can play hero ball sometimes because he's so unique getting out of pressure. So you really, really, really want to try to box him in as best you can, make him beat you from the pocket in order to give your DBs a chance on those long scramble plays, because I don't think we talk about those enough, how hard those are to cover downfield. And if you don't get pressure, this outcome could be really tough. So they have to create pressure, but pressure in a way that keeps him in the pocket will be their biggest challenge.
So you mentioned Rodney Hudson going to be missing on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, sounds like Chandler Jones, great pass rusher for the Cardinals, won't be playing in this game. For the remainder of the Cardinals on the defensive side of the ball that will be playing from this game, what do you think we can expect from J.J. Watt and the remainder of the Arizona Cardinals, as strange as that is to say?
Yeah, they're aggressive. So they play the 10th highest percentage of man-to-man coverage. They're not afraid to blitz you. They play really big up front. JJ approaches the 290, 300 range. Rashard Lawrence is a big guy, their nose tackle. They'll play Zach Allen. They'll play Corey Peters. They'll play Likai Fotu, who are all at or over 300 pounds, big guys. And then they bring up on the edges, they'll bring up both Isaiah Simmons, who's a nice young player. We all know him from his Clemson days, the positional flexibility Isaiah Simmons brings is sort of that unicorn top 10 pick he was in the 2020 draft. He's getting more comfortable in the NFL. They'll play him along the edge. They obviously did play Chandler Jones. Now, I don't know if they'll switch this up. Maybe they'll bring rookie Victor Dimukeji up. I would imagine you'll see a lot of Marcus Golden and Devin Kennard. Both of those guys will be up playing that stand-up edge rusher that they play. They got really weird, Corey, and played a 6-2 look against the 49ers, which is something I think they'll try because the 49ers last week, they structure their offense sort of similar to what Cleveland does. So they're probably flirting with that last week. They're only playing 3 defensive backs in those personnel groupings. So you might even see a little bit of that as a means to, I know Nick Chubb has been ruled out, but it's a way that they could try to really keep everything bottled up and eliminate the run game between Kareem Hunt and what's likely to be Dearness Johnson. So if they do that, they'll throw an extra big guy on the field. They're big up front. They try to have a unique player like Chandler Jones. It's a thing that they'll be missing off the edge, but they like their linebackers too. Now I know Jordan Hicks is beat up. I think he's got a toe injury that's made him questionable. We'll see if he ends up playing, but they like their 3 backers between Simmons, Jordan Hicks, and Zaven Collins. A guy out of Zaven Collins, a Tulsa first-round linebacker, was a heavily debated prospect. Cleveland ended up, I think, getting the better player in the second round in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, but Zaven's okay. He's seen an increase in snaps over the last few weeks. I think he will get a lot of snaps in this game, but they like to be big up front, ideally, and athletic at the linebacker position to chase some things down when teams try to go lateral on them. It's been working. Their defense is playing some of the best football in the league, largely because they're covering well. Their run defense is not it's not great. But most of these teams, if you can stop the pass, you traditionally will have pretty good success with stopping the opposing offense from scoring too many points for the most part. I mean, Cleveland's run game is, when fully healthy. Now we know it won't be fully healthy. When they are, it's a unique outlier because they're so good. But when you play most teams, you can give up some rushing yards and be okay if you can stop passes from, hitting big chunk plays downfield, or getting teams off the field on third down. And their coverage group is pretty good. It's been playing well. It's Byron Murphy's their best corner. They really like Robert Alford. Their second corner, they've been playing Antonio Hamilton a little bit. So as their third guy, Jalen Thompson and Deontay Thompson are their free safety types, and then Budda Baker, who is one of the better coverage / rangy players at the strong safety position, will get down there too. So Baker and Byron Murphy kind of anchor the group. They've been playing well, probably due for a clunker because I don't think they're the most talented group, but the results have been pretty strong so far, and they're very confident, even without Chandler Jones. They're confident that they can create pressure, give Cleveland run game some fits, and potentially cover well with some press man and get away with it. Because like I said, they're aggressive by nature. About 38% of their snaps are in man, which is about 10 to 15 more than Cleveland plays. So it's a philosophical difference, but it's also a bit more trust in their personnel to be able to handle that. And it's paying dividends so far. They are not giving up very many points.
We have another question from one of our viewers here live on twitch.tv. If all of our corners are good to go, is it possible we can shut their offense down?
Well, I don't know about shutting it down, but you can manage it, right? Like, you want to keep them in the 20s. That's the goal. A team like this, I think everybody loses perspective that last week, before things went haywire and a couple busted coverages in the second half, the Browns only gave up 13 points at halftime to the Chargers. Like, they can play with these teams. They just have to play full games. You can't give up 4 touchdowns where you don't have anybody within 5 yards of the receiver, right? Like, that's an important aspect here. You cannot bust coverages against good players. You have to make, the Justin Herberts and the Pat Mahomes and the Kyler Murrays of the world can beat you even if your coverage is excellent and perfect and where it's supposed to be. And that's why, even more reasoning of why you can't make the game even easier for those guys than it is before. This collective group of wide receivers, this top 4 for them, is as talented as anybody Cleveland will play or have played from 1 through 4 in the last few years. Pittsburgh, when Juju Smith-Schuster was healthy, was a unique challenge because they could go Claypool, Deontay Johnson, JJ, and then, slow down here a little bit. Could go Deontay, could go Claypool, could go Juju Smith-Schuster, but then also James Washington. That was a really good group of 4. This group of 4 is pretty dang good, in my opinion. So I don't know if they can shut them down, but if they can keep them to 27 or less, that would be a pretty good outcome, in my opinion. And they could keep them lower. It all depends on how healthy Kyler is and how they're able to effectively move Kyler off of his first read while simultaneously getting some pass rush pressure home. Because even though the Browns gave up some points last week, the pressure was still there. I thought they did enough to create some pressure. They just didn't cover well enough. So hopefully we see those two marry a little bit better this week.
Absolutely. If they play with fewer defensive backs than the usual, the Browns try to exploit that with more 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, or will they stick to their guns and try to go tight end heavy with Austin Hooper and David Njoku?
I don't see a way in which Cleveland doesn't play their tight ends a ton. It just would be so out of the ordinary for Stefanski. He loves those guys and the versatility, and he wants to make teams play with more defensive backs. And if you try to match 13 with defensive backs, they're going to run on you. Even when games in that last year Nick Chubb missed, they were pretty good at putting points on the board. Like, if you take out those 2 terrible weather games, they were able to put points on the board. And it's really nice to have a fallback that, hey, Nick Chubb gets hurt, but there's Kareem Hunt waiting in the wings. So not many teams have that ability. It's going to be tough. You never want to play games without Nick Chubb. He's so special. But if teams want to match 13 personnel with multiple defensive backs, then you're going to get burned because they run so well out of it. Now, if they want to say, I don't care what wide receiver group you put out there, we're going to maybe sit in 4 DB looks. Yeah, I would hope they would adjust and try to take over some of those space-based positions at wide receiver, and putting wide receivers against safeties and safeties and linebackers is always advantageous. We just have to see. And the Browns test this every week. They'll throw out personnel groups in the first quarter on the first drive just to see how the opposing defense matches up to it. That's a big part of the chess game week to week. So I expect them to continue to do that and try to exploit some things. And I thought last week they were really, really good at exploiting some mismatches. And between Alex Van Pelt and between Callahan and between Stefanski, I think they'll continue to figure out ways to keep doing that.
All right, Jake, in your expert opinion at this point, do you believe this is going to be the week that the Cardinals finally get their first blemish? Any final thoughts going into this game? What are your thoughts and predictions?
It's the travel element helps, right? I think that helps immensely here. They're missing two of their leaders on both sides of the football. It's a game Cleveland needs to win. They need to feel good about themselves again. I don't think the Cardinals are, and the NFL, I talk about this all the time, is such a motivation business. Which team is motivated more is often whether you see games close between two disparity in talent teams. Like, for example, the Titans losing to the Jets. There's like a game like this every week. And I'm not saying there's a huge talent discrepancy here at all. I think these two teams are pretty even, actually. But I think Cleveland has a lot more motivation here. They're playing at home, which helps. Like I said, you're traveling a couple time zones. That always is a burden. So I do think Cleveland can get this game done, but I think it will be pretty close. I think something like 27-26 or something really tight there. Maybe like a 29-26, something like that is my opinion. It is going to challenge the line, which I think the line right now is Cleveland giving up a couple points, 2.5 or 3 points. So it's going to be a close game, in my opinion. I would be pretty surprised if it was a blowout either way.
Well, thanks so much for the insight, Jake, and for joining us. Remember to check out theobr.com on Monday for film breakdowns on the Chargers game, and to make sure to tune in on Tuesday for the Baker Film Room due to the shortened week this week. Thanks as always, Jake.
Hey, thanks, Corey. Anytime, man.
All right, and to round out the show and finish things off, we welcome in the web dork, Barry McBride, to the OBR Roundtable. He's our very own publisher, and we're going to go ahead and go around the AFC North to finish things out here. Barry, let's start with the bad news. Ravens are now the sole owners of the first place position in the AFC North with the win over the Colts last week. The Colts lost their top 5 cornerbacks and were forced to play Andrew Sendejo for significant snaps, and we all understand really where that put them in a position for. So they sit at 4-1 after a relatively easy start to their season, sans the Kansas City game, of course. But now they face a tough opponent in the opponent that the Browns just faced last week in the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, we're going to find out a lot this week about exactly how good the Baltimore Ravens are. Of course, they've been hit by injuries. Ronnie Stanley's been out all year. They've lost a couple of running backs, so on and so forth. And, they had this unbelievable passing comeback to beat the Colts last week, but they did it. They needed a record-setting field goal to beat the 0-5 Lions, but they did it. This team seems to keep coming through, and they face a genuinely strong opponent in the Los Angeles Chargers. And I just think we're going to learn a lot during this particular game. It'll be a very interesting one to watch. The Chargers, in terms of their defense, they're most vulnerable against inside runs, and that's what Baltimore likes to do. So their strength plays to the Chargers' weakness to a certain degree. I cannot go through this game, analyzing this game, without this quote from the defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens on the subject of Justin Herbert. He said that Herbert was one of those guys who could throw a strawberry through a battleship, is his quote. And I have no idea what he's talking about, but it's an interesting metaphor, I guess. Throw a fruit through a major naval vessel. Okay. But, I think this is going to be a high-scoring affair based on how the teams have been playing of late. And it may be another situation like it was last week where the team who has the ball last wins the game. Jackson, I made fun of him as being a running back. I think most Cleveland Browns fans have, sort of degraded what he's been able to do. But last week, granted, Andrew Sadejo was on the field, but he completed 37 of 43 passes for 442 yards. And you can't do that if you're just a running back.
So the Steelers showed a little bit of life on Sunday. They were able to take home a win against the Broncos. They head to Seattle this week to take on the Seahawks. Are the Steelers turning a bit of a corner here? Yeah, are the Broncos also just more fraudulent than the Steelers?
I really don't know. The Broncos defense is real, for sure. But I think this game might be at Heinz Field. I'll have to look that up. But the Steelers are 2-3. The Seahawks are 2-3. They're tightening up the AFC North a little bit. I was hoping that they would just go away and not sneak up behind the Browns. But this is really a battle of two teams that aren't all that great. The funny thing is in Pittsburgh, it's finally sinking through to them that they're not being highlighted a lot in primetime games. This is somewhat of an exception, which is like one of the first signs that your team is pretty mediocre, is that the TV networks don't want necessarily to feature you quite as much. So they're figuring that out. But, one statistic I saw is that the Seahawks oppositions, have been 12-13. And the Steelers have played better competition so far at 17-8. Other than that, the teams look pretty close. So you'd sort of use that to say, hey, maybe the Steelers are the better squad here. But, I think this game comes to DK Metcalf versus Joe Hayden. And DK Metcalf is going to win that. And therefore, I'm picking the Steelers to lose next weekend. I almost always pick the Steelers to lose, but this time I really mean it.
They do tend to surprise us the following week when we come here, and they end up winning again. So, and you were exactly right. That Sunday night game at 8:20 is at Heinz Field. I took a look at the time and thought they may have had that in West Coast. So, some late football on the East Coast Sunday night for us. So, and lastly, some good news. The Bengals continued their insane luck in terms of unforced opponent errors, with the Green Bay Packers missing not one, not two, but three potential game-winning field goals, but the Bengals went back to doing more of the Bengal things that we're kind of used to, could not finish the game. And Green Bay finally, lucky number 4, managed to finish off the game and send the Bengals down to 3-2. They now face Go ahead.
I was saying, I thought I was going to eat my words last week because, I guaranteed a Green Bay Packer victory, and that comedy of errors down the stretch with these two teams refusing to win, consistently let the Cincinnati Bengals back into this game that they had no business in winning. So they have 2 losses. They're to the Bears. They're to the Packers. The Bears are a team that the Cleveland Browns just destroyed. They've had a pretty easy schedule, but they've got a good chance to beat the Lions because the Lions are 0-5. And at this point, I don't think they're favored in any game that they are playing the rest of the year. At this point, you couldn't pick them over anybody, which means those Lions have a good shot of outdoing Hugh Jackson and the Browns by 1 game. So 0-17 might be their destiny. But at the same time, they've come close to wins. They lost on a 54-yard field goal against the Vikings. And the stinking Ravens had to kick a record-setting 66-yard field goal against them, right? The Lions have come close to wins, and this might be their opportunity. Joe Burrow coming back from a throat contusion, just like JOK injured his throat last week. Before the season, a lot of us, myself included, were really putting down the Bengals for picking a wide receiver in Jamar Chase rather than getting more protection on the offensive line, including some rather obvious offensive tackle choices that were available to them. And we look like we're wrong so far because Chase has had an amazing year, right? But you really tell whether or not we were right by whether Joe Burrow survives the year. and he's getting some close calls already. And I'm not rooting for him to be injured or anything like that, but that will tell the tale as to whether the Cincinnati Bengals made the right decision or not. But I think they've got a good shot against the Lions, because the Lions are absolutely horrible, and the Bengals can't continue their 2021 tradition of beating really horrible teams.
Well, Barry, the AFC North race is off to the races after the first 5 weeks, and we are neck and neck so far, pretty much a quarter of the way or so, or third, maybe. Not a good time for math way through the season. We're not halfway, that's for sure, but we are getting there. So, Barry, where can the folks find you on Sunday for the game, before the game, rather?
Well, on Sunday, you can find me starting at about 2 o'clock or so, well before the game against the Cardinals starts. I will be at Old River Tap and Social. People are used to hearing that. It's in Rocky River. They're a great bunch of guys who we're working with down there. And this weekend, they will be having a remote tap room from High Wire Brewing. And they will also be having a pig roast. And you can get all you can eat for like $30 there from their pig roast. It's pretty amazing. I don't know if I will be diving into the pig personally, but it's a very popular special for them. And so come on in, get there early. And if you're from the OBR, please say hi to me. I'll be the hefty gentleman behind a computer in the back of the social room.
Sounds good. Well, we'll see you there, Barry, and everyone else. We'll see you on Sunday. If you'd like to tune in for the pregame for Barry and everyone else that joined us this evening, everyone else at the OBR, we grant you a great Friday evening, and we'll see you on Sunday. Thanks for tuning in.